So one of the things about being a queer person is that we are very, very rarely born into queer families. In fact, statistically, we're less likely to be born to queer families than not. And that means that so many of us grow up disconnected from the stories of our community, of our people, the stories of our history. I have been very, very lucky to sit at the feet of a few people who have lived that history, and I'm very excited to invite one of them up to the Bema this evening. I want to welcome up Aidan Gilbert, who you all know, hopefully, and if you don't know this individual like personally, one-to-one, you should absolutely come and inundate him with love and affection after services are over. But you do probably know him by looking at our Torah scrolls. If you ever noticed the really beautiful mantles that cover our Torah scrolls, Aidan made all of those. So among his many talents and many loves, includes a love of storytelling and story sharing. And so I'm excited to hear some words of Torah and history from you tonight.
Thank you. Can you hear me? My name is Aidan Gilbert. My pronouns are he, they, and my adjectives are funny and inappropriate. As an older bi man in a loving, monogamous relationship with a woman, I may seem like an unusual choice for speaking on Pride Shabbat. I was a little surprised myself. But if you squint your eyes and you tilt your head just a little bit, I think you'll see the wisdom in Rabbi Stephen's choice. I know what an unsettling time this is for the queer Jewish community. We stand in a harsh spotlight, being threatened from all sides. Our detractors are doing their best to erase our history and burn our thoughts. They demonize the youngest and most at-risk among us. In spite of that, I'm here tonight to remind you that despite all of our detractors' efforts, we've made huge strides, and that's something we can take pride in. 42 years ago, when I came out as a bi kid in central Illinois, queer was still a pejorative. The police still raided gay bars. Seemingly normal, caring parents cast their children out onto the street, and trans and biphobia were rampant both inside and outside the LGBTQ community. The 80s felt like everyone we loved was dying around us, because they were. Open, public expressions of affection could get you beaten within an inch of your life. In 1990, Reform rabbis were tasked with voting on the question whether to ordain gays and lesbians as rabbis or cantors. Yeah, think about that. My synagogue in Springfield, Illinois, had a listening session to discern the thinking of the community. I sat across the table from people I knew and respected who threw around the terms abomination and avera. These were people I had prayed with, laughed with, and mourned with. My heart was breaking, at least until an older man stood up. I'd never seen him before, and he stood up, he rolled up his sleeve, and held his concentration camp tattoo for all to see. "I want you to see my credentials," he said. "I lived in a time where I thought love was dead. I cannot and I will not deny anyone who brings love into the world. I will learn with them, I will pray with them, I will dance at their weddings. I lived in a time where I thought love was dead. I lived in a time where I thought God was dead. We are tasked with keeping both alive." As you might imagine, no one spoke after him. After breaking up, I asked around to find out who the man was, and nobody had ever seen him before. So that's what I say was the day that I met the prophet Elijah. I'm happy to tell you the Reform rabbis voted in favor of gay ordination that year. Woo. For those lucky enough to live in a town large enough to support a gay bar, walking up to the gay bar door for the first time was an act of incredible bravery. Bravery which I hope was met with laughter, dancing, cheap draft beer, and maybe a passionate kiss. But most importantly, the ability to exist authentically in a community where they were safe, or as safe as a gay youth in the heartland can be. I remember my first foray to the bar, Smokey's Den in Springfield, Illinois. I walked past it 3 or 4 times. Who am I kidding? I walked past it at least a dozen. And I found its windowless storefront uninviting, but once inside, it only took me a couple of minutes before I knew these were my people. And I slow danced to the jukebox with a 6'2" tall drag queen. It was a great night. Today, gay marriage is legal from sea to shining sea. We did that. We did that. We also secured civil rights protections for every member of the LGBTQ+ community in Illinois. Our bars now have windows where once they were boarded up. We fought long and hard, sometimes resorting to the occasional thrown pump, but we did it. What else did we do? We fought for and won the right to foster and adopt children, creating permanent, loving families. We fought for millions and millions of dollars for HIV research. And now the scourge that killed so many people we loved is a manageable, preventable disease. So sorry about that.
It's okay.
We methodically built foundational support and formed alliances which turned LGBTQ leaders into political power brokers. Across the country, we elected out members of the community to the positions of judge, alderperson, mayor, state rep, state senator, Congress, and the U.S. Senate. And don't forget, a gay man ran for president. All of this is progress. In giving a devar, one is charged with finding some way to make the reading relevant. That's a tall order with many parshas, but especially this one for me. This week's Torah portion teaches us that God doesn't like crybabies. And wandering in the desert with only manna to eat resulted in a fair amount of crybabying. To be perfectly honest, what we really learn in this parsha is that the character God can be a bully. God may be omnipotent, but they weren't patient or understanding. They were cruel and vindictive. Oh, they also had a little bit of a arsonist tinge to them. God was so vexed, they set the Israelites' camp on fire. I'm not kidding you. There was a great deal of smiting. Then Miriam had a racist moment, which God punished by inflicting her with leprosy. It took Moses' intercession with the omnipotent to secure a cure for her. But still, God acted rashly and cruelly. I don't want to leave you with the impression that only God is prone to sudden violent thought or action. We're quite capable of rash judgments and bullying of our fellow Jews and our fellow queers. After all, we are made in God's image, although I'm glad to say that smiting has gone out of favor. It is worth the discomfort involved to seriously examine instances in our lives where we mocked or bullied other members of our community. Later in the parsha, there's a detailed matrix for blowing the shofar to mobilize the tribes of Israel. I want to focus on this detailed, tedious manual, not because I'm a scholar of ancient forms of semaphore, but because God spelled out how they were to be used to communicate with the Israelites and mobilize them. As a people, we've been beset by myriads of enemies, countless times. The Shofar Codex provides a structure within which the Israelites were to communicate, consolidate forces, protect the people, and move them forward. We don't have need for the shofar today. We have phones that do almost everything. But we still need to heed the call to mobilize. The same cabal that overturned Roe versus Wade has now trained their soulless eyes in our direction, making the upcoming election cycle important for our survival. The election in November will literally be a matter of life or death for many LGBTQ folks. Our right to marry as we please, the legality of our families, the safety of trans and gender nonconforming youth, all of this is on the ballot this fall. Heed the call of the shofar. Mobilize. Protect the gains made by our predecessors. We stand on their shoulders. Register to vote if you haven't already. Then make a list of the issues that are important to you. For me, it's choice, LGBTQ civil rights protections, affordable housing, peace in the Middle East, nutrition supports. You make your own. That's the important part. Once you've made it, check the candidates' positions against your list, and don't give your vote to someone who would hurt you or your community. In other communities, Christian fundamentalists, the ain't right, and white nationalists have used school boards as a way to advance their culture war agenda. I don't think it's too early to start talking about next spring when Chicago will elect its first Board of Education. We will need to be vigilant. Complacency is not an option. If complacency is not an option, neither is invisibility. We won't let fear drive us into the shadows. If you know, nobody puts baby in the corner. We've come too far. Baruch Hashem and Shabbat Shalom.